Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Patriot Party, where truth, transparency, and constitutional principles come before politics. The Patriot Party movement is focused on re-empowering we the people, restoring accountability, and putting America first through honest conversations and real solutions. America first, not America only, because we lead by example. Today's guest brings a perspective shaped by both entrepreneurship and public service. Jim Oberweis is a longtime business leader known for building Oberweis Dairy into a nationally recognized company and for founding Oberweis Asset Management. Along the way, he spent decades working in finance, agriculture, and small business, industries that often feel the direct impact of government regulation and economic policy. Jim has also served in public office and has been a vocal advocate for ideas like term limits and simplifying the tax code. Jim, welcome to the Patriot Party.
Thanks, Matt. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to jump right in if you're ready.
Sure, you bet.
Okay. So, you've spent decades building and running businesses. From your perspective, what's the biggest misunderstanding policymakers have about how small businesses actually operate?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever thought about it in those terms. Uh, you know, government reg- government regulators tend to have bureaucratic hoops to jump through, and that's probably for many small businesses the biggest block that they have. And I think our president is actually focused on that and trying to help reduce some of that. Here in Southwest Florida, our biggest town is Cape Coral, and unfortunately, it's fairly well known for having some bureaucratic challenges to jump over. In that, I hope that the city manager and the board will try to reduce those bureaucratic blockades in order to attract more business. Cape Coral has grown dramatically, but the business sector and manufacturing has not, because I think in some cases companies have just not wanted to face those challenges.
So, what are the pressures that entrepreneurs face today that someone writing policy in Washington might never see firsthand?
Well, usually for small business, capital is a significant requirement, and regulators in Washington don't seem to worry much about that. Oh, we'll just spend it, and we'll tax it, or we'll have board debt, or what have you. That doesn't work for a small business.
So, and I was going to mention this later in the show, but this is a perfect place for me to kind of interject this in because I think this would work as a tool, a wonderful tool for small businesses, and we're scaling it up for all Americans and an education tool for competitions for the American Institute for Civic Leadership, which is a wonderful nonprofit that is being piloted in Louisiana schools before the first donation has been taken. So the software that we built is called a federal policy producer. You can take data points, you can take an idea, or you can take a problem, and it uses AI assisted software to keep it on guardrails to make everything transparent, and it will spit out Washington ready legislation that's in formatted and ready for the Washington in Washington format. And it spits out a policy packet that tells people how to contact, who to contact, but it also, on the back end, this is the part we're scaling up. We have a pipeline to DC. We have a DC location and we educate and advocate in DC. I'm actually taking a trip next week. And so we get anybody's ideas that coincide with the last 2 years worth of news cycles. We get them and we can use our pipeline to get behind them. But what we can't factor and what's unquantifiable is passion. If something takes a lifetime to change, we want to give you the technology to do it.
That sounds terrific. Sounds like something I can use next year when I get to Washington. That's very exciting.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to be meeting with all the Louisiana legislators, 8 of them when I go this, or not them, but their staff when I go to DC this next week, before we do like a national scale. But yeah, we're doing it as a competition tool for students in middle and high school. We have a wonderful program, a new civics program that introduces civil discourse, constitutionality, whether you're originalist, whether you're a living document, you give them both sides. The teacher acts as the coach, the AI is an assistant that basically is letting them learn at 10 times the pace. And it's a wonderful curriculum that we've got going on right now. But let's get back into this interview. Let's get back into so many regulations are created with good intentions. but sometimes the outcomes look very different on the ground. Where do you see the biggest gap between regulatory intent and real economic impact?
Well, look, I think most of our government bureaucrats are well-intentioned individuals who think they're trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, in a free market economy, sometimes these roadblocks make it much more difficult for businesses to implement what they're trying to accomplish. So it can have a negative effect instead of a positive effect.
So, so how should policymakers evaluate whether a regulation is actually helping the public or unintentionally slowing growth?
Well, one thing would help if we had more of our policymakers had a little business experience. That's unfortunately, I think, one of the problems with our Congress. Too many of the members of our Congress and of our state legislators across the country have never actually had to start or grow or build or run a business. Having that type of experience really gives people, I think, a different perspective, and I think would help lead to better policy.
You know what I think would help really well, because what we're trying to do, see, we're a big advocate of responsible AI use. Anybody that's trying to take human jobs with AI and give it the final decision, that's irresponsible use. AI should be an assistant to enhance humans and make them more productive and able to do more and do a better job. And so it should be out here. It shouldn't be as the final thing. But what we found is that it's really good at helping take human emotions out of things that need to take human emotions out of, like muddy in the Constitution, because everybody's emotional, no matter how much legal training you have. We see it with our politicians. So it creates guardrails to keep us constitutional, to keep us transparent, to keep us, we even have our business structure to extract greed out of capitalism. So it's true trickle down, like Ronald Reagan was talking about. So I think it would be good to take and do an evaluation on these policies with AI and then put the human in the loop to make the final decision of what AI finds. To see if, because we have our AI program, when it looks at a problem, it uses hindsight and learns from every mistake in history, and that's how it designs the answer.
It certainly makes sense. Historically, people are worried about technological changes costing jobs. Whether it's TV or the internet or whatever, and history shows us that it may, in fact, replace some of those jobs, but then it creates many more new jobs that weren't in existence prior to that, and increases productivity. Increases in productivity are what lead to increases in our standard of living.
Yes, profit margins, so we can trickle the economics down. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is where we're going to start getting into some really cool parts of this show. So, the American tax code is often described as overly complex.
Oh,
And
Lord.
from your vantage point in finance and business, where does complexity create the biggest friction?
Look, I have been a long-term proponent of simplifying our tax code. And we talk about that, and instead it gets worse rather than better. And I'm sure the president had great intentions with things like no tax on tips, or no tax on Social Security, and no tax on overtime. The problem with that is that we as business people look at that and say, well, let me think. If I can give my employees, they can have no tax on tips, I'm going to pay more in tips and less in their base wages. I'm going to pay more in overtime and less in their, I'm going to have a 30-hour week instead of a 40-hour week, and everything over the 30-hour week is overtime. So it just makes things all that much more complicated. Now, what's the answer? Well, the answer that I propose, and it's a really tough sell, it's tough to get people to understand it and move forward, but it would be a great simplification if we had some type of a flat tax.
We have legislation, AI assisted legislation on our proof of concept page right now for a consumption flat tax. But this is what we did to satisfy the people that always say, well, the wealthy don't consume as much as everybody else, and so it doesn't even out. So this is what we did on our version as a proof of concept. It starts a flat tax at 15%. Then at 8 zeros, every zero you add 5%, and it caps at 35%. At like near 100, in the hundreds of billions.
I would have to sit down and take a look at that, but I will tell you that my proposal has been zero tax on the first $50,000 or $100,000 of earnings, then
What?
10% tax on the next 50 or 100,000 earnings, and then after that, a flat rate of approximately 23%, which would generate approximately the same total revenue for the government. Now, that is, however, assuming there are absolutely no deductions whatsoever. No deduction for home interest loans, no deductions for depreciation, no deductions, period.
Well, doesn't the flat
Maybe,
tax get rid of?
wait,
Oh, excuse me.
maybe the one deduction might be charitable contributions, but that would be it.
Well, I mean, isn't the flat tax the whole thing is to get rid of all the dead weight of the IRS and just allow a simplified version that can probably be processed through software?
Exactly. And unfortunately, there is a significant constituent that would not like this, and that would be those in the accounting business who do tax returns.
You know what's so funny about our legislation? It will not let you design partisan because this is a nonpartisan. This is a nonpartisan movement. This has nothing to do with normal party politics. So you can't design a Republican or a Democrat. The only thing it will let you design is something that is designed with the data points, not donors in mind, for what's best for the American people. We have a health care bill that's currently in D.C. in the top health care that will save the American people $2 trillion a year by substantially reducing the third party system and taking advantage of high interest state run HSA accounts.
There is a huge opportunity in that area. I think you're right on an exact target there. That's a great idea, and that's the kind of thing that I want to work on when they send me to Washington next year.
So I'm super excited about this because this is the first time that we have done this on this show. Like, I literally designed the software not in mind of scaling it up, not in mind of designing a curriculum, but to do our flagship legislation, which was a constitutional quality control board for the legislative branch. It doesn't dictate things. It just is a transparent body that shows if a law that's being enacted or an existing law is constitutional. We were going to use that as a learning transparent tool. But when I built the software, it was there. So we had a guy on our Fixing America series that had an idea to fix healthcare. He sends me the data points and we come out with that. And then I'm like, well, we need to give this to the American people. But today we have done something special. So you've spoken about the need for term limits.
You bet.
And the Constitution that originally envisioned citizen legislators, not lifetime political careers. This created a disconnect between us and the voted for electors. So
Exactly.
so in honor of the show, we used the federal policy producer yesterday. It's going all over social media right now. We produced a term limit legislation that we believe will withstand Supreme Court scrutiny. It's called the Congressional Service Rotation and Civic Renewal Act. And what it does is it gives, the House people so much, the Senate people, but it doesn't tell you or disenfranchise the voters. They can still write you in on the ballot, but because states control the ballots, it's an incentive to rotate out for one, and then you can rerun. But you can still run, you're just not on the ballot. They have to write you in. Because we think it's a way to get around it. We don't know. Yeah, without a constitutional amendment.
That's an interesting idea if that would stand up. And I know sometimes these things have to go to the court to see what they say. For example,
Supreme Court.
The whole birthright citizenship issue is something I campaigned on 10 years ago, and people told me, no, there's no chance it would take a constitutional amendment to change that. Well, now we have the president who is proposing the same exact idea, and it's going to end up at the court. I'm hoping the court may say, well, look, the framers of this Constitution never meant that people could come in when they're 8 months pregnant and have a baby and then say that's a citizen. This was meant to assure that those citizens of the United States, or at least people in the country legally, their children would be American citizens. So I got my fingers crossed. I hope that happens. And just to go back for 1 minute to the term limits, I live in Florida, and guess what? We have term limits in Florida, 8 years for the House, the Senate, and the governor. We have a great governor right now, but he's term limited out, and we're going to have a new great governor. I think Byron Donalds, who's currently my congressman, is going to end up being our new governor. And I think the system works very, very well. It does exactly what you were talking about. It prevents career politicians from getting and taking control. And understand, I lived most of my life in Illinois before moving here. And Illinois is, a perfect example of what's wrong with politics. We literally, during my lifetime, had 4 governors, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, go to prison. The Speaker of the House, I served 2 4-year terms in the Illinois State Senate. The President of the House, Speaker of the House, was there, Mike Madigan, for 40 years, and he was Speaker, I think, for 36 of those 40 years. And guess what? He's now on his way to prison. That type of lifetime service leads to corruption eventually, and is bad for our country, it's bad for our state, it's bad for our communities. The best thing we can do is provide term limits. Now, the next question is, how could you ever get term limits passed? Because a lot of people say, oh, I'm for term limits. But after they get elected, well, I'm for term limits for everybody else, but the country needs me. I'm too valuable to quit after 8 years. My solution, or my possible solution, or workaround, if you want to call it that, is we propose legislation that provides term limits that are effective only on those who are first elected beginning in, pick a number, 2030. Therefore, politicians voting in term limits would not, in fact, be subject to the term limits they voted in, only future electees. I don't think there's any way you're going to get the current Congress to vote to limit themselves.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we have a plan for that. It's in a longer term plan. It's in our 5 to 10-year plan, because after we scale up this AI assisted tech later this year, we're launching a fast news channel which will stream on Roku, Samsung, Amazon, and then it'll simulcast on all the social media networks, called Truth Matters News. And it's going to be, independently fact checked, no rumor mills, no party politics, completely through a constitutional lens reporting. Now, we may have constitutional lawyers debating things on living document versus originalist, but everything's going to be fact based through a constitutional lens. Now, once we create and once we get a big enough network in 5 to 10 years, we've talked to constitutional lawyers and we have an idea. And I don't know, it's a big idea, but we're also working with municipalities with our software, helping with affordability and transparency. I'm meeting with the mayor down near New Orleans and the city council on my way to DC later this week or next week. But when we do that, we've talked to constitutional lawyers about having the states request a limited constitutional convention, because it can be done. There's a method there. It's just very ambiguous. So if it's structured properly, we believe it'll hold up in the Supreme Court, because it'll get challenged. And then the DC, it takes them out of it.
I was just at an Eagle Forum luncheon yesterday, and they are scared to death of constitutional conventions. If you could do a constitutional convention limited to 1 item or 2 items, I think most of us would be strongly in favor of it. What people are afraid of is opening a Pandora's box and letting in all kinds of new things.
Yes. And well, I think it needs a few more, because I think that there needs to be a structure. Those ambiguous terms need to be defined in the Constitution on how to call a constitutional convention, so everyone doesn't get challenged in the Supreme Court. There is a structured method, because my belief, I believe in kind of a hybrid between the originalist and the living document. I don't believe we should subjectively be able to interpret something living, because there's nothing in the original document to me that tells that it's meant to subjectively interpret as a living document. I haven't found anything. I'd love to talk to somebody that has, but I believe there should be a structured path, so it's a structured living document.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So you've moved between the private sector and public life. What skills translate well from business leadership into government, and what doesn't?
Well, you've got a very different structure. Obviously, in business, you have a profit motive, and that's what drives the business ultimately. And you also have to have a budget and live within that budget. And by the way, one of the other strong proposals that I have made is Congress's job is to pass a budget, and they haven't done so in more than a decade. My belief is that if Congress doesn't pass a budget, they shouldn't get paid. And guess what? If that's the law of the land, where if they don't pass a budget, they don't get paid, they will pass a budget, because they all want to get paid. And if they do pass a budget, the good news is no more continuing resolutions, no more government shutdowns. That ends that whole mess. Now, to pass a budget, it would take some some compromise. Republicans and Democrats would have to figure out how to work together and solve some of these things. But the incentive to work together to solve these things is there because it means their paychecks for all of them. And they would pass that kind of budget. Now, the next step is that budget ought to be a balanced budget, at least in all times except perhaps in times of war, or if there are special circumstances like a recession. I would say a little bit of a supermajority might be required to pass an unbalanced budget, 60% or something like that. But if people think that that's necessary for that particular situation, okay. But that would lead to much more likelihood of having balanced budgets on a regular basis.
And you know what else would help if you built the budget on strictly data points? Like literally all the numbers were run and balanced on all the data points. So it had nothing to do with anything personal or anybody's agendas. Literally, what's the best budget for the American people?
Yeah, of course, how you define what's the best budget for the American people is a very difficult challenge.
Well, I mean, I think that whatever costs less and gives them the most bang for their buck. The same way you define it in a private industry. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for a quarter of a century, and that's how I define it. What's going to give me the most bang for my buck for my money?
Yes, but when you have a Congress of 400 people represent 435 people represent their own district, it's not going to be quite that easy. If you had a company run by 435 executives, you'd have a very different situation.
Well, in the numbers, in the analytics, it would probably be able to break down the demographics of who's supported in what areas, because they have that breaking down to single votes with AI and election things. They're doing amazing things with election stuff, figuring it up. I'm sure you could figure that up in the analytics that would actually technically tell which representatives should vote in which way, I mean, not they would have to, that's their choice, but it would probably tell the numbers, and numbers don't lie if they're calculated properly.
Sure. I mean, look, that is clearly a step in the right direction. I'm not sure that answers all the questions, but
well, no. This is what I say. We don't have all the solutions. We are literally building the foundation to turn America into a giant Times Square, because who better to solve our problems than us that's living? And I have a beautiful story that, I mean, if I'd have been a politician, it would really have been a beautiful story. So my wife and I just got married. Here's my cruise. I just got back from a cruise. And
wow,
yeah, I made some videos right now about what we're doing for the American people. They're going in the hundreds of thousands, getting 10,000 views an hour. And when I was on the cruise ship. So anyway, gosh dang it. I mean, I was going down a point. I lost my daggum train of thought. What did you say? Yeah, I know I said my wife, my marriage. That's what I lost my train of thought on. What did you say before I went off on my wife being married? You were saying, oh, solving all the problems. Yes. So we're literally trying to turn America into a town square. One of the beautiful stories that I have is a piece of legislation that's on our sheet to help start to fix the immigration problem. Is I was in a tattoo parlor. My wife wanted to get a little cover up before our wedding, a little vine thing to cover it up on her fingers. She had researched this girl that did the best job. We were in there. The girl had a foreign accent. My wife's like, "Where are you from?" She said, "Venezuela." I said, this was when Venezuela was in the news. It was before everything happened. I was like, "Oh, you're in the news." And so my wife's like, "Well, how'd you end up here?" She said, "Well, 4 years ago, I was 17. I was visiting my brother. I was going back to the airport. My papers got stolen. I had two choices. I could go back to my country and never come back here to visit my brother, or I could file asylum and never go back to my country to see my parents." And I said, "This is broken." So I fed the problem into the federal policy producer, and it has spit out a constitutional fix to that problem. It's actually on our proof of concept page as well. So we want to give this so Americans can literally help real time fix problems. And what's cool is, as an education tool, we're doing a scholarship in each state, starting here, where the top middle and top high school winner for the best legislation to fix a problem, they win a scholarship. But they also have the opportunity for their state legislators to take it to DC. So we turn parents and children and civics teachers into a giant think tank to fix America.
That sounds like fun. Sounds like a good idea.
we're working towards it. So I got another question. Your work has also included support for community causes like food banks and outreach programs. How do businesses stay connected to the communities they serve rather than becoming purely profit-driven institutions?
Well, 30 years ago, I set up the Oberweis Foundation, whose purpose was to do two things: to support conservative causes, conservative ideals, and secondly, to help people in need, like food banks, St. Matthew's House, cancer centers, things of that nature. And fortunately, we've done a pretty good job investing the funds that I contributed. We've now gotten up to a point where our foundation donates approximately $200,000 a year, which can make a significant difference in a lot of different areas. So I'm very pleased with the results that we've had with that. Excuse me. And we're always looking for good grants to make, good conservative causes to support, and we do help a number of veterans groups as well. So we're very, very pleased and proud of what we've done in that area. And in fact, we put out a list. I pass it around sometimes at political events that I go to, showing all the grants that we've made of $1,000 or more last year, and again so far this year. So it's wide open. People can see exactly what we're doing.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we just put in for a grant with somebody called the Interg Conglomerate. We're trying to build in for the pilot a little stipend for the teachers. They don't get paid enough, you know. Anything we can do to help, and then they kind of do the analytics and report back to us so we can make the program better. You know, that's what we're trying to do. But absolutely, we're big into some veteran causes. I mean, we have veterans on the show, or people that are doing stuff with veterans all the time. We just had a guy on, JJ Parma. He was a Navy SEAL for 20 years, got a huge podcast, but he also is running a AI enhanced gun detection program for schools. But there's a human in the loop. The last loop is the human. So we had him in, and they've been able to catch like hundreds of ones that the human eye cannot catch, which is a wonderful thing, I believe.
You bet.
But they're having trouble right now with the funding for like schools because there's so much break in funding with federal and state right now.
No question about it. Can I just take a moment too and talk about another
Yes.
solution that I have, I think, on our illegal immigration problem?
Yes.
And illegal immigration is something that I have been very public about for 20 years. I ran a TV ad 20 years ago with me flying in a helicopter over Soldier Field in Chicago, saying enough people are entering our country illegally every week to fill every seat in Soldier Field. And that was factually based on a study done by a professor at the University of Michigan. Well, I will tell you, the liberal press in Illinois went crazy. They hated that. You know, I must be a racist if I don't want all these people coming in from other countries. The time was maybe a little too early, particularly in Illinois, but certainly I think the point was exactly right. Now, how do you deal with it today? Well, I will tell you that in the 80s, when Ronald Reagan proposed an amnesty program for people who've been here, who were working, who had jobs and all the other stuff, I thought that made sense. But history says we were probably wrong, because that amnesty program just encouraged more people to want to come here illegally and hope that eventually there'd be another amnesty. So here's my suggested solution, and it helps our budget as well. I believe the government should stop providing government benefits to people in this country illegally. Things like SNAP benefits, unemployment compensation, Medicare, and Social Security. And by the way, if they are working, they obviously have to pay Social Security, but they should not receive Social Security benefits. That would help get our Social Security system a little bit better in balance, because that's well underfunded too, and likely to be in a position where benefits will have to be reduced in about 6 or 7 years if we don't make some changes. So that would be one small modification that would help a little bit. Secondly, if we're reducing all those other benefits, that would help balance our budget. And it would make it much less attractive for people to enter our country illegally, because some of these benefits that are here would no longer be here. I believe that would help to cause self-deportation, instead of the government trying to pay $3,000 to each person to self-deport, or having ICE try to go into Home Depot and round up anybody that looks like they might be here illegally. Those things are probably not good for our society, but finding a way like this to encourage people to self-deport, and again, emphasizing that if they do self-deport, they can then apply for legal status, legal citizenship. But if they don't, and they're rounded up by ICE, they're done. No more chance to come back. So That helps to solve budget problems. It helps to solve our illegal immigration problem. It makes ICE less scary compared to what we had, let's say, in Minneapolis. I mean, it's just a win-win-win situation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the taxpayers should not foot the bill for people that aren't here illegally, and we have to have something
But
to
we
have a
do.
sovereign nation. We have to have, well, that's what I'm saying. They shouldn't. You're absolutely right with that. I don't care what party. We should not be paying for people who are not citizens. We can't go get that in any other country in the world. If we're not a citizen, we shouldn't be paying it to anyone else. But I do believe with I believe it's going to take several pieces of legislation because and that's just why I believe because it's so complicated. And ours just gives a reasonable pathway to be able to citizenship, where it takes them 13 years, but then they can go home and travel to their own country. It's a ramp up period. It gives them a light at the end of their tunnel instead of no, we can't never go back. But I absolutely agree with what you're saying for the American people. I mean, that's built on data that we don't need to be paying stuff that we don't need to be paying.
Right.
Good deal. Good deal. So, if you could speak directly to Americans who want to build businesses, strengthen their communities, and participate in public life, what principles should guide them? Not who to vote for, but how to think about service, responsibility, and economic freedom.
Well, I think there are two types of individuals. There are risk takers. I'm a risk taker, and you almost have to be a risk taker if you're going to start a business and have that responsibility. And there are other people who would rather be a part of something and work with somebody else who is taking that risk. Government is a little different. In government, you have individuals who are willing to, you should have individuals who are willing to serve. They don't necessarily have to be the same type of risk takers, but they can certainly do a great job if they're willing to commit to it. But I think when you start a business, it is an all-consuming activity. I mean, when I started my businesses, it was like 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and maybe only 6 hours on Sunday for 1 or 2 or 3 years to get the business growing. But that's what it takes, and people have to be willing to make that kind of a commitment. Government service doesn't require that much of a commitment. It does require a significant commitment, however, particularly, I'm now in that type of a mode in running for Congress here in Florida 19, where I am literally spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day on various events, getting out to meet people, to talk about our ideas and how we might help to improve Southwest Florida and our country as well.
Yeah, and you do have to put it in. I mean, I start my mornings at 2:30 every morning. Now I'll go 12 hours because I have my daughter trains to be an MMA fighter. She's 11, and so she trains 5 days a week. Yeah, she's been doing it for years.
No thanks, not me.
She
That's not
is a
my.
girly girl, wears makeup, dresses. They think she's in cheer. She's like, no, I'm a fighter. It's hilarious. But anyway, I have to put my schedule around that, and then my wife's a nurse practitioner, so it's all over. But I always tell people, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, you really are just connecting dots and being a problem solver. You're solving problems all day, all the time. Connecting dots and solving problems is what I tell
Yes.
people.
Yes.
So is there anything else that you want to say before I get off the show?
Well, I think some of those ideas are critical. The ideas like term limits, no budget, no pay. And by the way, I thought that was a new idea when I came up with that. And it was an article written in the local newspaper, my article. And I got a call from Senator Rick Scott who said, Jim, I've already filed that bill called No Budget, No Pay. So I was very pleased. And I'm hopeful that I can get to Congress next year and I can help support it on the House side while he continues to try to support it on the Senate side.
It's so funny you mentioned Rick Scott because when I first started talking to Mike Johnson, his chief of staff, who's my legislator here in Bossier City, Louisiana. They mentioned Rick Scott's bill, so I did a comparison and analysis on our healthcare proposal and his healthcare proposal because it did utilize HSAs a little bit, but not like ours. And so we did the whole comparison of his bill, and there was none at the end when it did the whole comparison. I mean, there was none, but it's funny you mentioned him, and he's literally the one that we got compared to, that we had to do the comparison with. So
One
Jim
other thing,
Oberweis, thank you. Yes, sir.
one other thing I'd like to talk about too. I feel very strongly in the SAVE Act. In fact, Immigration Accountability did a kind of a road trip calling attention to that and ended up in Washington. I flew up to Washington to participate in that. Chip Roy was there, Eagle Forum was there, and several other groups. To me, this is just common sense. This shouldn't be a Republican or a Democrat issue. We should all be concerned about voter integrity and making sure that that we have American citizens voting and that votes are counted properly. And I had a personal experience in 2020. I was asked to run for U.S. Congress in Illinois against the incumbent Democrat, and I agreed to do so with the president's endorsement, by the way. As of election night, I had won by 1,500 votes. 3 days later, they decided to count a bunch of mail-in ballots that were never initialed by an election judge as required under Illinois, because they said because of COVID they couldn't hire enough election judges, so they couldn't have them initial. Well, maybe they were legitimate, maybe they weren't. I will never know. But that kind of stuff just drives a person crazy. That's when I said, okay, I am done forever with Illinois. I'm done forever with politics. I'm going to Florida to play pickleball and golf.
But not pickleball.
I love pickleball. A lot of fun.
No, absolutely. I mean, our election system, it needs to be shored up and made sure that it's accurate. And I'm sure there's some technology in there somewhere that can help us with this new coding that learns and all that and has those guardrails. I'm sure we're going to be able to do it. I'm not, like I said, I'm just building the framework. There's people that hopefully this is a generational. Well, I call this a nonviolent generational realignment. And the two things that, see, we used to just do a podcast based on truth and Constitution, hashtag Truth Matters. Didn't even know I was going to do a fast streaming news channel called Truth Matters News. But then I reported on two polls in 1 week, and that's when this movement started. One said over 1 in 3 Americans believe that it was going to take violence to get us back on track politically. And 2 was less than 1 in 5 Americans know the 3 branches of government. So I tested it, but I didn't test it on. I tested on people with their doctorate, people with their masters, and they knew 2. They didn't know 3. And I said, "Oh, this is a systemic failure. This is not in there. We need to put it back in there." And that's kind of what brought this together to be a nonviolent generational movement. So I just want to build the foundation and then hand it off.
Well, thank you for all of your efforts and your work in putting that together. It certainly sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim Oberweis. Thank you for joining us. That is what the Patriot Party is about. Truth over narrative, gratitude over entitlement, and empowering we the people through honest conversations and real solutions. And remember, America first, not America only, because we lead by example.
Thumbs up.